That's right. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Ann.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're gonna miss 5 folks. We have 12 on the CAC. We need 7 for a quorum. So who's, and do we know if they're gonna be able to make it tonight?
And I don't count, right?
No, unfortunately.
Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, I don't see Dave.
why are there 12?
One more.
Or there's 13, but we need one more person to join and we have a quorum. If not, we just don't approve the minutes, and that's fine too.
Okay, I thought there were 15 open positions.
I think the 15 members, looking at the roster right now on the clerk's website, includes the board and PC liaison. So I think there are 13 CAC members. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 15. Yeah. Guess we need more than that. I can't count today. I'm sorry.
It's way too hot to count.
Okay. Does anyone know if, just going down to the list, John, Valerie, or David Mitchell are planning to attend?
I didn't hear from any of them.
Okay.
So I was assuming yes, but
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and wait a couple more minutes, see if these folks join. Otherwise, I think.
yeah, it's we can probably just start, and if I'll just skip the minutes. I don't, because how many more people would we need for quorum then?
We would need 8 for quorum, so we would still need 2 more folks to join. So that means 2 of those 3 that have not responded would have to be here.
Yeah.
So it might be a little tricky.
Yeah, so I feel like we'll just skip the minutes unless they miraculously appear.
Yeah, maybe we could just get started, and then if they show up, we'll just do it at the end or something.
That all sounds good. We don't need to do any votes or anything else tonight. We'll do a couple of informal polls, but it won't be an official vote. We'll just be us taking stock of kind of the general opinion so far. So we'll make that work.
Okay, well, hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thanks for coming. Obviously, it was a tough night to come, and you know, summertime and all that. So this meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with the emergency ordinance number 20-A6, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. Was it disaster before? I thought
Official declaration, yes.
disaster. Okay. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are, I'm going to read off the list, myself, Ali Pesh, and we have Doug Bates, Joe Four, Josh Rector, Costas Alivertis, and Tom Loach. The persons responsible for receiving public comment are the Crozet Community Advisory Committee and the Albemarle County Department of Community Development. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Crozet Master Plan Update webpage at www.publicinput.com/imaginecrozet and on the Albemarle County calendar. And then we also have at our meeting tonight Andrew Newpol, Michaela Carty, Rachel Falkenstein, Carolyn Schaefer, David Benish, and Serena Gruya from the county. And we have our Jenny Moore, our planning commissioner, and Ann Malik, our supervisor for the Whitehall District. So next was the minutes, which we'll skip since we don't have a quorum.
Ally,
Yes.
it's Doug. Just a quick question. Can anyone tell me, I can see that this meeting is being recorded. Are there any observers online that we can't see, or is there some expectation this to be posted?
The meetings all get posted on the website after being live streamed, and I see we've got Valerie joined, but we're still short of a quorum. Yeah, so maybe Andrew can tell us. I'm not monitoring to see if other people are watching right now.
We currently have 7 community members that are watching as attendees, not in our little panel right now, but they are able to see everything. We can also allow them to speak as well at some point during the evening as well.
Cool.
The meeting will also be recorded and shared out the same way we've been doing it. It'll be posted on YouTube and on the Crozet Master Plan update page on the Public Input Hub following this meeting. So we're recording it. Reminder that everything in the chat is also being recorded as part of the public record. So we do have a couple folks watching from home. Thanks for being here tonight. And yeah.
Thank you.
7 is not as many as we would normally have at a in-person meeting, but not so bad, I'd say. All right, I think that's all I can do, and now it's Andrew's turn to talk.
Okay, thanks, Allie, for getting this all started, and I'll keep an eye on the membership and who else here tonight. And thank you all for being here. I know it's a difficult week following up a holiday weekend in the middle of the summer. Warm week and lots of stuff going on, so I appreciate you all being here. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen okay? Okay,
yep.
So nodding, so that sounds good. Great. Well, tonight is our 3rd work session for the Crozet Master Plan. We started these in May when we started to resume normal meeting procedures after taking a little bit of a break due to the coronavirus outbreak and having to essentially reinvent the way we do business as a community entity. So this is our 3rd work session, our 3rd focused on the character and land use chapter of the master plan. We had this titled as a connectivity work session. We hope we'll have some time at the end to get to that. But this will mostly focus on wrapping up our land use conversations from the last 2 meetings. And again, this has sort of been delayed since our March special meeting we had scheduled. And hopefully this will be a point tonight where we can start to get some conclusion before we start to bring this forward as staff. Just for the agenda for tonight, for the work session, we're giving ourselves plenty of time to work through our remaining questions. I'll spend a little bit of time at the beginning, just talking a little bit about what comes next in the process and a recap of where we've been so far. We have about 15 minutes for our 2 site-specific questions from the last meeting that we discussed. You all should receive materials in advance kind of outlining the staff analysis so far, and this was, we did a quick presentation on it at the end of the last meeting, and we'll still have plenty of time for discussion there. We'll also shift into some other longer discussions at the end about the future land use plan and the urban density land use category. A couple of you all did fill out the form of public input in response to some of our questions. We appreciate that. I think acknowledging that it's a difficult response, turnaround time, given the holiday weekend and the 1-week notice, we're probably going to plan to walk through each question and just share a little bit of what we've heard so far and have a kind of some time for conversation. But at the end, I think, well, for most of these questions, we'll have an opportunity to do a quick poll of the group and see comfort with the staff recommendation and concept moving forward. Understanding that at this point, we still need to start to move the some of these topics and questions forward to more refined draft proposals in the Planning Commission work sessions and so on. This graph is one that I share with you in, I believe, May when we restarted most of our engagement work. And it highlights some of the changes to our engagement schedule from the COVID pandemic. We are at the final of the our July work session, kind of the last of the 3 we initially outlined as we were kind of starting to assess the impacts of the coronavirus on our engagement schedule. We know now that the county will still plan to move forward with virtual meetings for the near future, and we'll probably just continue to work with those formats for the foreseeable future with our planning work. So we'll probably have a couple more work sessions coming up in the next few months, but we're anticipating this will be the last one we spent talking about land use. August next month, we'll hopefully start to focus more on the connectivity and conservation workshops. We have the connectivity, roadways and transit opportunity open right now. We're hoping to get the conservation, which is parks, green systems, sustainability topics, get that launched within the next week as well. So we can get some feedback there and start to bring that all back to you. Towards the end of the calendar year, our goal is to start to bring these concepts and topics to draft chapters of the master plan, get these topics refined a little bit more, and have some more information, some more research and analysis to support a more detailed conversation with you all, and eventually work sessions with the County Planning Commission towards the end of the year. We're hoping to start that probably August or September. We think that the schedule sort of cleared up earlier than we were expecting, and we know that there are still some land use topics we do want to get their input on. And we'll probably expect that to start in August or September. But again, I think I'll just recap where we are with the master plan update and our intent so far. I'll just reiterate that this is an update to the 2010 master plan and an opportunity to really account for change in the community since the 2010 plan was adopted. We've started with the current master plan, the current land use maps and designations that are shown in that plan, start to identify emerging needs and areas for improvement in our projects and policies. We're really trying to make sure that we use this master plan as a tool that articulates what the community wants. What the community wants to see, starting to provide guidance for how we can successfully get the type of development we want in Crozet and achieve the projects that we need to maintain the quality of life and improve it as well. And the revisions we suggest are based in what these current issues we've heard are, the current vision and the best practices we hear. We're certainly always trying to improve the quality of our master planning work and make sure that the policies are implementable and effective, and it does set out clear expectations for the community at large. Just to recap today, I won't go through every bit of feedback we've heard, but again, everything we're talking about today is based on several months of ongoing conversations about land use that have all built on one another. We started really early on in October talking about the small town feel, sort of the form and visual character of Crozet. We've had discussions about our commercial centers, housing, architecture and preservation, and so on. And this is starting to hopefully get to a stage where we are wrapping up and able to have a more polished product in the next couple months. As I mentioned, this will be our last kind of character or land use discussion before we hopefully start to bring this product towards more refinement and working with the Planning Commission. And next month, again, we'll focus on connectivity and conservation. And in the future, hopefully in the next month, we're initially hoping that the coronavirus would have blown over and we would have made it past and we could have an in-person workshop. But we're probably going to continue to do that virtually and come up with an online feedback opportunity that will involve policy and project implementation, project prioritization, and a lot of the infrastructure questions we have so far. And that will also rely on the feedback we get from the connectivity workshop soon. And again, the master plan establishes a lot of these land use recommendations as well as infrastructure and policies. And I'll reiterate that the master plan is the first step in getting all this put together. Ultimately, though, the county budget and work therefore the funding and timing of implementation are driven by the board. The plan, again, sets up expectations for the future. And just want to emphasize that this is where we begin from. It's a lot of high-level conversations. And you know, as we move through the process, we'll get into more and more details about how we get this all done. So that's my real quick recap of where we've been so far, and again, setting up the conversation for tonight. These are, again, the points where we need to establish a little bit more clarity in community expectations. We've heard from the community at the workshops and online feedback opportunities about the things that are important to them. Staff's come up with a couple alternatives and recommendations. I think tonight we're looking to the CAC as representatives of the community at large, kind of the citizen planners of Crozet, to help us weigh in and get a better understanding of the community's opinions, some of the concerns that there might be, so we can, as a staff, more effectively come up with some recommendations and have an informed discussion with the Planning Commission that's responsive to what the community wants to see. The first, so I'll go ahead and move to the first of our 2 site-specific land use changes for tonight. This one was titled Whitegate Farm, and we'll have about 15 minutes for this topic. We'll hopefully have about a poll, about 10 minutes, and we'll ask you all to chime in, about 5 minutes at the end for further discussion about the CAC's stance on this issue, some of the concerns we have, and suggestions for how we can address community concerns as we continue to refine some of these proposals and take them forward to the Planning Commission. So I won't go a whole lot through the background information for Whitegate Farm. I did the presentation at the last meeting, and the information was all available in the agenda once again for you all. This is a parcel at the near the intersection of Route 240, 3 Notch Road, and Park Ridge Drive. It's immediately to the west of the Wickham Pond development, and is currently designated as a green space parcel in the 2010 master plan. As staff, we're recommending that this parcel be redesignated and split between an urban density residential category and a neighborhood density residential. So a kind of a mix of housing types, continuing what's been developed at Wickham Pond. We're just identifying the visual buffer. That's the reason this area is shown as green space on the map, and maintaining the stream buffer on the site as parks and green systems. But we're looking to redesignate other portions of the parcel from a green space or industrial designation to a residential category. This responds to some of the community feedback we've heard so far in the process. In February, we heard about support for an urban density, more of a townhouse designation, and redevelopment as an opportunity to improve connectivity to some of these eastern neighborhoods in Crozet. Currently, that parcel does not have sidewalks on its frontage. It's kind of a wooded barrier between Wickham Pond and then as well to the Highlands. During when they did the online feedback, about 50% of online participants supported a lower density designation. About a third felt no change was necessary. Others felt a higher density might be appropriate there. And when we did send out did share this information out the last CAC meeting, we did get a couple comments about the density on the parcels, and as well as the portion immediately adjacent to Park Ridge Road, where the Bright Beginnings preschool is, of higher density might be appropriate there. We kind of used a potential road connection and a stream buffer to divide the parcel, but we did hear some feedback that was not entirely consistent about a potential residential designation for this parcel. So with that said, I think we want to keep just the background information pretty high level, so there's plenty of time for discussion with you all this evening. But we want to just ask you all if you have any feedback, questions, or concerns with that staff recommendation. And we'll do kind of a raise hand with the Zoom feature to have that conversation. About 10 minutes in, we'll ask you to we'll have a poll with Zoom. That's a function we have to kind of just gauge general support for this discussion so far. But if you are able, please be prepared to just really briefly share your concerns or feedback so we can share that with the Planning Commission. A sentence or two, but we are kind of on a time crunch, so just want to be sensitive to that.
Andrew, can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
When you, on the slide before, when you talked about the percentages, and I apologize if this was somewhere in materials that you gave us and I missed it, I've been away, but how many, when you say 50% of online, how many were there that respond? Like how many people are we talking about when we look at these percentages?
We had 83 participants in that feedback opportunity.
Okay, so
I guess I think you're asking the CAC members this question and maybe not Planning Commission, but at this point, but I will say that I continue to have a concern about how not that there isn't a great attempt at it, but that we're not engaging the community, not because of the fault of anyone. I think there's lots of great efforts, but because of everything that's going on and summertime, people being away, I'm really concerned that our community engagement, not because people aren't trying really hard and being creative, but I'm concerned that it isn't what it should be. And I'll just say that as an overall comment.
I have some questions on the land use.
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Yeah, just one clarification. When you say you got 83 responses, was that 83 members of the community who were at the meeting, or was it, I thought this was done during a separate breakout session? That'd be one question. The second question I have is, how many development rights does the property have now? And two, since this land has been in open space, what has been the taxation rate for this? In other words, has the owner been getting a reduced tax rate because this is an open space?
No.
I don't have the numbers from the, at least the February workshop off the bat. I think we had about 30 or 40 folks in attendance, and then the 83 refer to the online participants for that. This is a 12-acre parcel. It would have currently zoned rural areas and have about 5 development rights. That means we could build 5 houses on 2-acre lots, 2-acre lots and change on this parcel currently. I'm not aware of any taxation questions. I think we're approaching this from a land use and planning angle right now.
Well, that it would be. I mean, if in fact this has been in land use and the owner's been getting a substantial tax decrease because of this for a good number of years, I mean, to me, that makes a decision in making the land use. The other thing too is I think we have two things we're talking about. One is a master plan. There already exists a master plan standing for this space, which is open space. And I'm not sure when you say we have to hurry, because it's the next master plan we're talking about. We're talking about a community meeting for this from the context of a developer coming to the CCAC. That's a different situation. But I mean, you're recommending, but I don't see why you're recommending. In other words, can anybody in our group, the CCAC, tell me why we should, change this from an open space designation to a higher densities designation when we're facing a period of extreme pressure on the community because of the growth and development in the community and probably the inability of the county, and I maybe can pipe in on this, as far as their ability to provide the infrastructure under the pandemic constraints they have vis-a-vis not getting sales tax. But I think that all of these are important. But again, we go back to, this is open space. If you went to the Planning Commission tomorrow, staff would ask, what is the designation? That designation is open space, right?
I'd love to pipe in, if I may. I understand that this is one of the few parcels where the green ink was just laid on an entire parcel, which is in effect required that for the owners and descendants of the owner to do anything, they would have to have a rezoning. And they did request more than 2 years ago that when the master plan came up, that because it is in its current location, could it be considered for some other use? And so because the county didn't buy this to use as a park. So to me, it seems very unfair for us to say, oh, by the way, you're now a park, the green space thing. So while it was an idea to certainly protect, as Andrew has done in his draft, the stream, natural features, all those kinds of things with setbacks, it is a little harsh to say that I think that the whole 12 acres has to be park when we're not paying for it.
I'm not saying that
so the land use taxation issue is completely different. I think when it was a farm, when Mr. Vaya was alive, Mr. James, they had cattle there. I remember pushing them back through the open gate one day when they were out in the road. But that has not been the case for a number of years. So I don't know that there is any active agriculture been going on there. And I would just while I have the microphone, leave a couple of questions for Andrew to think about later. And that is this a prime place for bungalow courts and other small house clusters that would be very different than townhouses I mean, there's a beautiful treed site of 12 acres. It's a lovely spot right across the street from a conservation area, which is actually locking down the whole north side of 240 from development. But if I were dreaming, I would love to see small houses and the sort of things that we've seen, the bamboo court idea here, because it is in a really great location for people, but not necessarily have to have 3-story condos jammed in there and chopping down every tree in sight. We know that the road buffer is important, but the buffers on the sides can be as well. And really, the trail connections are wonderful that you proposed to Wickham Pond, et cetera. But that's just what I wanted to ask and let you all think about that. I'm not sure urban density is a great idea there at all. That's just my thought.
I see Joe has a comment.
Yeah, so I wanted to maybe respond to Tom's point, the question about why would we want to rezone this. First, the point about this being green space. You know, as someone who drives by this property every day, I mean, it's not green space, right? It's an overgrown, dilapidated property with trees that are out of control and a falling down barn that you can kind of see through the tangle and thickets of trees. So, you know, the sense that it's green space and that it's like useful or people are using it, I don't think that's kind of accurate. And it's directly across from, as Ann pointed out, an open field, you know, grassy areas, crops and farm property. So, you know, it's not like there's not other open space there. The other thing to me that's really important is that, you know, as Andrew points out, some of the future land use just to the west there, right? Between Western Ridge and Star Hill, there's this push for, I think, as listed in the materials, light industrial flex R&D development with the hope that there might be some, you know, employment opportunities there, some new businesses moving into that area. And so if we talk about pedestrian opportunities, walkability, bikeability, I think that is going to be a prime location right there, close to Western Ridge and also close to that Star Hill area. It's going to be an easy commute, an easy walk, an easy bike for people that are living there if they're working in those R&D, flex, light industrial spaces. And the last point I'll just make is, I think as Andrew mentioned, you know, one of the, currently I think you said would be like residential at, you know, two houses per acre or something like that. You know, it's a very light use right now if they wanted to do it by right, if they were able to. And that's just not even in character with the rest of the neighborhood, right? You've got Wickham right next to it, and then you have Bright Beginnings, you've got the healthcare facility right there. So the idea of putting, you know, big lots, big homes on big lots would really be out of character for that space. It would really stand out. So I think that's why I was sort of supported. And I was in one of those smaller focus groups of the in-person when talking about this. And so that's why I think higher density would be appropriate for that lot.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I also want to try to respond to Tom and say I appreciate not really just resisting any kind of additional housing opportunity, you know, development opportunities. But I mean, just because, you know, like you're in your email, how far behind the infrastructure and the schools are. But at the same time, these property owners, I feel like, are in an unfair situation with a sort of random designation that doesn't seem congruent with the adjacent properties. And it's not really a rezoning, it's just it's gonna make it easier for a future person. And I think we have the opportunity right now to maybe designate it, like Anne said, for something that would hopefully come in the form of like the bungalows or, you know, not townhouses, you know, so I guess I'm leaning that way.
Hey everyone, for the interest of time, I'm going to pull up the poll on this question just so we can see kind of where, even though we're a smaller group, things stand. And then I think we'll have time to take a couple more comments reflecting on that. So you should see a poll on your screen now with an option to either support staff's recommendation to have White Cape Farms future land use designation be neighborhood density residential and urban density residential with a visual buffer along 3 Notch Road and maintaining the stream buffer.
Michaela, I'm going to vote for number 3, which isn't on there, which is to support the staff's recommendations, but with incorporating a lot of the ideas that you've already heard about infrastructure and the need for transportation hubs that could operate out of this space. And I also respect Ann's comments about what the owner wished to do. I think that's important.
Thanks, Doug.
Can I, real quick, if we rezone it, it doesn't say that it won't be townhouses, right? Just because we intend it or would like bungalows, it doesn't mean that we can dictate that. Is that correct?
Right.
And
Yeah.
we're also not rezoning it. We're only designating it for future land use.
But Costas is right, though, is that if you go 3 to 6, you don't, after that is done, you don't, the community, that is to say, does not have the right to say, well, we want bamboo houses in there or whatever you want to put it. Yeah. I mean, therein has always lied the problem, is that we're asking for more residential density in a population we're having trouble handling now that is well over the recommended population from consultants, you know, and it just seems to me, and I understand the owner's position, as Ali pointed out, but my point is that if in fact this land has been in land use and these people have been significant, you know, tax decrease to carry this land until now, that tax decrease has been paid by the residents of Crozet. I'm saying, you know, I'm looking, I guess, what Doug said is some sort of middle ground. And I'm not always sure we find it when we just put a color yellow on it. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, sorry.
The poll question went away and I didn't answer it because I think it's a little bit confusing, because you're saying, do you support staff's recommendation for White Cape Farm and neighborhood density residential 3 to 6 and preserve the visual buffer, blah, 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 blah. In there, it doesn't say anything about the urban density, which when you read it, you said that. So, but the question,
I also
so
didn't
I would,
that.
what are you asking? Like you said,
I agree.
I didn't answer
Sorry
it.
about that.
You're asking me the question on the screen, just take my answer. If you're asking about urban density,
So I
then
read it as staff's recommendation was on the slide. We have a character limit on this poll, and I think that it must have gotten cut off. So that wasn't intended to be any error there of miscommunication. I can reopen it, and with that information, if anyone wants to change something, that's totally fine.
I didn't get a chance to vote. I had a similar question to Jenny's. I pulled up the information from our meeting last month, and you had alternative A and B, with A being sort of a mix of urban and neighborhood, and then B was all neighborhood density. I want to voice support for A, really for the reasons Joe articulated, which I thought made a lot of sense. Its proximity to areas, and also you're right next to, you know, the medical facility and other, you know, a child care center. It's a good location to have walkability and perhaps help make up for the fact that this family has been sort of, as Ann said, sort of stuck in a quasi green space park area for the time they've been. So I just would like more options for voting. Thank you.
So are just the panelists voting, or are the members, people watching voting, or?
I'm seeing the panelists vote. So there were 7.
Okay.
That was
we're missing half.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's too bad that we're missing members.
Can you reopen the poll?
Yes, I'm trying to.
Okay, sorry.
It's reopened, and that means that it's restarted. So it's been cleared. The question is as written on the slide that Andrew has up.
Okay,
So we can't vote like Valerie asked for either a mix of urban and neighborhood or just neighborhood. We just have to say we support this statement or not.
And it's a poll, so.
And it's but when we say we're supporting this the mix of urban and neighborhood density.
no, that's not written there.
That's what's on the slide that Michaela said she was quoting.
Also, not to make things more confusing, but I think the community, someone's asking that they can't see the slide. So not to add.
We can.
I'm going to jump. Go ahead.
Feel free to jump in, Andrew. I was going to say, since this isn't working, we can do a verbal vote. This is our first try at this tool, and I think it's cool, but you know, based on this, we can do a verbal vote.
Yeah, so I think what we'll do is I'll just, we're going to do one at a time, do a quick voice vote, just say your concerns or your stance on the issue. I think we'll do the math and see how everyone's feeling, and we can just get the general consensus of the group. We know there are a lot of folks missing right now. So I'll just call on everyone, just say kind of where you are on this issue, and we will, we'll make some notes of that. We'll come back to that, and we'll pass that information on to the Planning Commission and other groups after we kind of aggregate it, knowing that a lot of folks are missing. So I'm just going to ask everyone, I'll ask you to just unmute yourself, just make your comment about where you are. If you support the staff recommendation for a split urban density, neighborhood density, if you're more for neighborhood density, just tell us what you're thinking might be appropriate, and we'll try to distill that down into this. I apologize for the technical difficulties and the confusion. This is a lot easier when we're in person to do this kind of quick straw poll. But I think we'll just go ahead and kind of work through. Just going to call on everyone as I see y'all in my brain. Doug, you just 1 or 2 sentences, let us know where you're feeling on this issue.
Pretty simple, Andrew. I think there's a winning opportunity for everybody involved here, including the owners. But I think it's important that we focus on the infrastructure needs that can be resolved here, and the questions of transportation. So whatever your words are that you need to make that the key, that's what I would support.
Okay.
Andrew, just so I don't want to interrupt your vote too, but I think we see on the chat there's someone who is not a panelist and says they're able to vote, but they can't see the slide. I know we've kind of scratched the last vote, but just to add that in, that would not. I mean, if people are voting, they need to see the slide, and the slide needs to be accurate. So.
Yeah, I think we're going to do a voice vote instead of a instead of an overall. Okay. I think we're still getting the hang of this. There's some options might be missing. There's some nuance missing there.
Can we still pipe in with nuances? I'd recommend that and go with this neighborhood density reduced Sparrow Hill solution. Go with neighborhood density, but the lower end of it.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Allie?
I would I would like to redesignate it as neighborhood density only, just to, you know, in my experience, we end up with the highest density allowed, and just to continue to try to rein in our maximum density here. I would want to see it stay 3 to 6.
Okay, thanks, Allie. Valerie?
Thank you. I would support, now that I understand better what your recommendation is, which is for this split, that's what I support, especially because a large portion of the property has the stream and the stream buffer area, so not developable. I think having a blend kind of helps balance that out a little bit, and then for other reasons that I mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I support the staff recommendation. consistent with surrounding usages, and a good walkability, bikeability as the employment centers open just west of there.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Josh?
I'm going to agree with what Valerie said. I think the split between the urban density and the neighborhood density, especially with the buffers and green space that will be part of that, make a lot of sense. And its proximity to the already existing neighborhoods and medical facilities seems like that's the greatest use for it.
Okay, thanks, Josh. And Costas?
I do not, I don't know that I have enough information for me to decide, because I think, like some of the things that were mentioned, once this recommendation happens, it typically goes in a different direction that we don't see, and so it tends to be on the higher end rather than the lower end. And so that could be a little bit different than what I would support. I like the neighborhood density model, but when it starts to hit the maximums of both, then that recommendation becomes a little skewed as to what we've discussed. So I think I'm going to abstain, because I don't know that I fully understand this particular recommendation or necessarily agree with it. So I don't want to vote against it, but I just don't feel in a position to vote for it.
Okay. Thanks, Costas. I think that goes through all of our appointed CAC members. So I think this, for 3 sports split, 2 are sort of a neighborhood density at a lower end, lower end of that 3 to 6. Some concerns we've heard really focus about infrastructure needs and really what will happen with this development. We do have an opportunity coming up with the bike ped workshop to make sure that's, as we start to refine and put together that plan to identify the important connections. It's worth noting, for this property to develop, it would have to go through a rezoning process, and whatever's in the master plan will help kind of determine what staff would expect from that proposal, and would set some expectations for the future development of the parcel as well. So I think there is an opportunity to address some of the infrastructure concerns there. But I think that this will.
But can I just respond quickly to Valerie's point? I just think that the urban density, the fact that there's a stream buffer, an undevelopable area in this property, only means that the actualized density of a development is going to be, very dense. I don't know the actual numbers of these acres, what part's buildable, what part's not. But if we want bungalows or something, this is going to be townhouses. I mean, it's going to be verticals if a big part of this is undevelopable. So I just want to reiterate that 6, I would rather say that have the master plan say a maximum of 6 than 12.
Well, 36. Urban density is 6 to 36. So it's a lot.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
a lot.
It's 12 in Crozet. In the master plan, it's 12. It's
We
36.
do have a discussion for the end of this meeting about the urban density designation. I know I've heard some comments about overall density, but also the form of development too. Bungalow courts often do reach into the, into a kind of 6 to 12 density range because of just the size of the lots in their development as well. So we can talk more about, I think, the form at the meeting, but for the interest of time.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, like Tom said, we can't guess. I mean, this isn't even a rezoning. We can't guess what kind of people are going to build on their property. But I would just like to reiterate that I think 6 is plenty density for these property owners and for our, vision for Crozet.
I guess I'd love to make one comment, which I don't think we're talking about yet. I mean, with its proximity to neighborhoods and a medical facility, I mean, it's not a hospital, but it's a neighborhood, clinic. What if it became a senior living facility? I mean, that's another option that the density would support, where if it was a lower density, it probably wouldn't support a use like that. So, I mean, I think leaving that flexibility of a split between urban and neighborhood still seems like the wisest thing on a plan that is meant to be sort of a global level, not a detail of exactly what it should be, like a zoning request. But that's
I think senior, something like that would be a commercial use, and that, I don't know that that's what would happen in urban density residential. I guess I just wanted to kind of circle back to what Costa said, even though he abstained, but I think what I got from what he was saying is something that's about echoes how I feel, is that when you get into those higher numbers, everything tends to shift to the higher. And, you know, when we talk about, we like the thing that happened, the bamboo court and these things, and other people have said this, we can't guarantee that that's what's going to be built. So I know we need to stay on a timeline. If you're going to try the poll, I don't know if you're abandoning that or if we're going to try that. I asked staff if I should answer or not, since I'm not a member and I was told that I should. So I think we need to be clear who can answer and who isn't, or if you're just going to, Andrew, just roll call through people. Because some people who aren't panelists said they could answer, which I think is great actually, but I would just, as we move forward, if we're going to put up another poll, I think it should say the right words, so we're asked the right question, and I think we should all be clear on who should vote and who shouldn't.
I think, so moving forward, I know that we were still getting the hang of this. I think what we'll do is this will focus on the CAC appointed members. For this chance, we know that this will move forward to work session with the Planning Commission board in the future. If Anna and Jenny, if you're all okay with that. I think there's just time to make sure that we're getting the community member voice here. I think this is kind of the last opportunity we had planned for this group to kind of chime in.
Right, and
we'll do voice votes, keep them as brief as possible.
Yeah, and I know that this, you know, you guys are doing the best you can with what we have, but we don't have a lot of our members here. So, you know, when it goes to Planning Commission, I wonder, are we ready? Are we explaining, you know, how many members weren't able to be present for vacations or different reasons? So I think it's unfortunate that we've come to a place where we're actually taking votes and getting the stuff, and we don't have a good representation of even just the group that's supposed to represent our community.
I completely agree. I think the whole, like, even just going around and saying our opinions is seems very official when we don't even have a quorum. And so I'd be very leery of this being like of any kind of formal recommendation, or, you know, that they got the blessing of the CCAC in this format, because we don't even have a quorum. And in a in-person meeting, the citizens in the audience would be able to chime in with comments. So I don't think it's really fair that they aren't going to be invited to vote in these polls.
I'll go ahead and
It might be helpful if we consider this as just a feedback session and giving staff some ideas and other questions to focus on. And I'm quite sure they're not going to the Planning Commission with anything remotely like a draft. They're updating the Planning Commission about where we are right now. And so I hope that we can all share what ideas we have and give them a chance to keep working on it.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I'll go ahead and chime in. I think our intent here, this is not a formal vote. It is to get your feedback on these sort of binary type questions. It's an A or B or yes or no. Sometimes it's easier just to take a poll, especially when we have a lot of content to get through. So that was our intent with that. If the CAC is not comfortable with this approach, we can abandon it and just, you know, go through and talk things. You can share and discuss and give us feedback, and we're fine with that. We're open to hear what panelists have to say, or non-panelists have to say as well. We can open it up to that. But I will say we did go to the board just a couple weeks ago with the timeline update, and we're expected to complete this process by the first quarter of 2021. And so we are on a schedule here, so we can't come back month after month and deliberate these same topics. So our intent was to move on from land use and bring some of these questions to the Planning Commission in August or probably September, and then come back to you all with another draft after that. But just continuing to deliberate these each month will continue to put us off schedule. So I just wanted to say that we're open to a different format if you're not comfortable with the way this is formatted tonight with the polling. We can just do discussions on these topics.
I think that what we can do is we can, as we move forward, we can just do some clarifying questions initially, then everyone can just go down the line and share your thoughts and opinions so far. We won't do any formal votes. But yeah, like Rachel said, we need some feedback so we can start to bring this into a more completed work product and start to share that out with these other groups in the future. And again, once we have some more information, we can start to do more refined estimates. We can do start to coordinate this a bit more easily. But so if that sounds okay with the group, we can just have this discussion. I think this, we also really want to make sure we're hearing from everybody as well. So, I mean, we might call on you more proactively with this format just to kind of get an idea of understanding of the broader community concerns here with these topics. There are a lot of moving pieces. I think we're kind of at the point we need to get some clarity on a few of them to be able to coordinate land use and transportation topics and put together a comprehensive plan. So if that's okay with the group, I'm going to move on to our second question. And obviously, we're also completely open to continuing this conversation at the future. I'll move to our second kind of area-specific question. This is about the Brownsville green space area that was shown in the 2010 plan as entirely a green space area. It was a similar situation to the Whitegate Farm property where the entire parcel was shown as green space. This one does currently have R1 residential zoning, which is 1 to 1.5 units per acre. Staff's recommendation is to redesignate the developable areas as a neighborhood density low designation, which would essentially reflect the current zoning and would better specify the locations of the visual landscape buffer on 250 and Crozet Avenue and other sensitive environmental features. This comes as some of our feedback. We've heard a lot of emphasis on preserving green space in this corridor, limiting new traffic on the 250 corridor, and kind of sticking to what's in the current zoning. We did ask about this in February. At both the in-person online workshop, it had fairly low support for changing this green space designation to this neighborhood density low category. We'd also heard about the importance of limiting outdoor lighting and providing a buffer between the road and any sort of development, any housing that's on there. The area is already fairly developed. We did have some questions come through after the last meeting about if any sort of rezoning or redevelopment of these properties could offer improved connectivity in this area, potentially to Brownsville, Henley, and Western Albemarle schools if these areas were to redevelop. But the staff recommendation has been to keep this with a low designation, reflect what's there, and try to provide some clarity in the master plan, because the swath of green that's shown on there right now, in staff's opinion, doesn't really articulate where we actually want development to occur, if any occurs out there. It doesn't identify or delineate the important features we want to protect with this area. So I'll go ahead and open this up for discussion right now. Again, the staff recommendation is to change the green space to this low designation and just provide some clarity for the community that this will not be a park area. This will be a low density residential area as it already is. And we're not trying to encourage a whole lot of new growth out there. So I'll pause for clarifying questions from the group.
I guess my question is, do we have any idea what the development rights are out there in that white area on the map right now? I mean, I would assume these lots have divisions, but maybe they don't, in which case this is what we have. I certainly support the way you have delineated the natural features that need protection much more clearly. So as long as we're not increasing the density by this designation, instead of having it rural, you're changing it to neighborhood density and residential low. Is that yellow with stripes? Is that what that is on the maps? Or are you changing the colors? We're going to have new colors going forward anyway, probably.
I believe that some parts of the last master plan had this very pale yellow with stripes on it. This is the same pale yellow.
Okay.
I guess I should note that the last master plan had kind of an area that was a regular neighborhood density, 3 to 6, kind of off Brownsville Road. This would change the entire area from green space and that they were density residential to a low density and some green space in there. It's currently R1 residential. Development rights are a little different. A quick back of envelope calculation shows that about 73 to 110 dwellings are possible there. I think that includes the current housing that is there. The 2010 master plan is about 90 to 116 just based on that neighborhood density blob there. This would be a maximum of about 107 dwellings because we do delineate the green space in there. And it would be a net density calculation.
So,
Okay.
Andrew, just a quick question. So what would be the difference between, you said 100 units if it were a neighborhood residential low density, if it stays as parks and green systems or whatever it is now, what would be the development right at that designation?
It would still be somewhere in the 73 to 110 under the current zoning. And there, the master plan with the green space category doesn't really specify new development, does not have a density range associated with it. But the underlying zoning does allow residential development on 1 acre lots.
So, and also just to be completely transparent, I live in this area, so I will abstain from voting or contributing.
I feel like, Costas, if you live in the area, or even more, you should.
Yeah, but I feel it would be unnecessary. If I influence development, it would be beneficial to me financially, and I don't know that that necessarily is ethical.
All right, Costas, let me try it a little different way. Andrew, have you spoken to any of the current residents of this community to ask what they think?
I believe we had a couple residents at the February workshop and have not done any further targeted outreach at this time. I think what we want to do right now is just test, the general concept of this. Is this an acceptable clarification in this land use map? But we have not done any sort of targeted outreach to these residents yet. We know, and we had a couple of folks in February, but that's kind of where we are right now.
I'm not sure if the current master plan isn't clear about 250, but it does say that we should keep as much development off of 250 as possible, and I don't accept a buffer as accomplishing that. So I agree with Ann. It should stay at the lowest density now, which is at the R1.
I'd like to jump in. Andrew, could you put up, if it's, I don't know if you have the ability to do this, but could you do a side-by-side of what the area, the current map next to the proposed map? So people can see the difference where you have that low density residential there in the middle right now. That would be changed from neighborhood density residential, which again is I think 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre. And that area would change from a maximum of 2 or just under 2. So I just want to make sure everybody understands part of it would change from green to pale yellow, and then part of it would change to from bright yellow to pale yellow. So I support your recommendation, but I would say with the caveat that this area stay as it is, because I think people have probably made, that's a big impact for them to go to just redesignate it and essentially down designate it from neighborhood density residential to low. I think having the area around it go to low density residential is really a positive, because then you have the ability as a part of a rezoning to obtain the buffer along both 250 and Crozet Avenue and secure some other types of trails and bike lanes and things like that and other improvements that would be beneficial and consistent with the master plan. But if you just stick with the by right R1 zoning, you wouldn't have that ability if someone wanted to subdivide it by right.
Thanks, Valerie. Anyone else want to speak on this topic?
I don't have a comment on this topic, but I wondered, because it looked like the way we were going to move through things, that these would be our 2 site-specific topics. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then, so I wanted to go back and last time I asked because in our February meeting, we broke out one of the questions that our group was asked was about Pleasant Green and the idea that above the their full build out number, which is approximately 237 units, that there was a potential request for 50 additional units. And when I asked about that last month, you answered, and I don't understand. Like, is that not a question that's before us? Because that was a question that was part of the February meeting. So where are we with that? And is that no longer a site specific question?
We discussed that with the what we call the downtown neighborhoods overlay, that historic overlay we discussed last month. That would have been covered in that area. We discussed that. In the February workshop, we did ask about if this would be an urban density or neighborhood density. Under the current neighborhood density, that density would not have been supported. That is currently proposed with Pleasant Green. I think we kind of tabled that topic, and because after that conversation, we did have a further discussion about these downtown neighborhoods adjacent. And the overlay we proposed did include that area. So we did not propose any further redesignation to an urban density category. Would have covered it with the downtown neighborhoods overlay we discussed last month. We did not bring that discussion back up again for this month. We had your feedback, and we're still working to kind of work with that feedback we received, but we wanted to make sure we focused on these other two topics for this month. So.
Okay, I guess I hope that it doesn't get lost in the downtown overlay discussion, that that's some sense of false security for those adjacent neighborhoods that, have this that's already out of size and scale and character, that it would be, that somehow offers them protection from it not growing by 50 more units, and that there is a process by which they could ask to rezone or something like that and make some sort of argument, even though there's a historic overlay. So I feel like we're taking these direct on, and the other ones sort of tabled, but it's, I don't know. I still feel like there's some confusion in the immediate neighborhood surrounding that, and from others about where that stands. So we can move on, because I know we're probably already behind, but I still don't know that I have a real answer to that question. That I think what you're saying is the overlay that you propose would not support a density that high.
I'll jump in since I covered that last meeting. The overlay was intended to support relaxation of the density range under certain criteria. So the criteria we shared were about scale and form and preservation of existing houses or neighborhoods. So I haven't looked at Pleasant Green really closely to evaluate what they're proposing under those draft criteria. If that's a useful exercise for the group, we could look into that and just kind of share how staff might evaluate such criteria. But since we're still in a draft phase and that project is moving forward before anything's finalized and adopted, that's just not something we've done at this point. Does that answer your question, Jenny? Is that sort of what you're getting at?
I feel like the direction that was given to the developer was the answer to that question, if it's still a question that they want to know the answer to, would happen in a comp plan amendment, which didn't make sense to do at the time, or under master planning. And so I guess, I'd like the answer to be in the hands of the community in some way to respond directly to that, rather than for it to be in the hands of just a few people if they come forward with that request after the adoption of the master plan. I mean, if it's really about form, I don't know how. I mean, there's already been a historic home torn down. There's, 237 units going on. I don't know how many acres. I mean, this development makes absolutely no attempt to deal with the character of the existing neighborhoods that are around it with size and scale. So I don't know how staff would respond to that, but I feel like there's this piece of me that feels like we're just leaving the door cracked open a little bit, and it's vague and it makes me uncomfortable, and we can talk about it later. But I just feel, I don't know why we're not talking about it in the way that we are these other site specific topics. And that's all I'll say about it now, but I will continue to bring it up because I feel like there's something about it that's vague and I don't understand why.
And that was certainly not intentional. We did not feel like we heard wide support for a change, like a blanket change in density for that area. Most people felt that preservation of existing affordable housing or some of these historic homes and neighborhoods was a priority. So that's how we framed the overlay discussion, and we didn't feel a wide enough outcry from members of the public to relook at that site and for a change in land use designation, just based on that proposed development. But we'd be happy to bring that up for discussion at a later time.
Okay, I'm comfortable with what you're saying. I just want to make sure that's where we continue to end up. But thank you.
Yeah.
May I leave 2 questions for future response? And that is the pink area, Danny Youssef's rezoning from maybe 2010. There at the corner of Crozet Avenue and 250. Did that special permit or rezoning, whatever it was, expire? And if there's anything active on that site, I've heard very scary rumors, but I don't know if they're true. So when you all stumble across some information about that, would you please share it with Jenny and me? Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other sort of questions or comments about the Roosevelt green space area? We received some of your comments so far, mostly comments about the of this corridor and just generally trying to keep things as is. I think we'll try to do to make sure we have our calculations firmed up before we bring this all forward again. But any other questions or concerns for this area at this time?
Are you going to take one of your polls, Andrew?
Yeah, we can do that.
Well, we don't need a poll. I would just comment. I'm usually in support of seeing how things can change, but in this particular case, I'd rather see things stay the same. So I don't think I support sorry, Costas. That's what I see.
I'm okay if they stay the same too. But
okay. Thanks, y'all. Let's see. Rachel, you cool with us going ahead? I'm thinking with this group, we might try to, we've kind of gone piece by piece for the past couple months throughout the land use map. We did include that in this month's packet. I'd appreciate you all, if you take any looks at this. This mostly reflects the conversations we've had so far throughout the entire process. Each change we've made to this map has been numbered. We included a table kind of describing what's been changed. And this has all been a response to the past workshops we've had. I think we're gonna table this one for right now so we can talk more about the urban density question that came up earlier, if Rachel, you're up for that. But just wanna pause and cover that first. I think this again just reflects what we've heard so far throughout the process. We certainly welcome any sort of feedback from you all about the map so far. But I'll go ahead and jump over to the urban density discussion. Since that is kind of a new discussion for tonight, we wanted to bring up with you all about the ranges permitted there and then what that category is.
And I will say on the land use map as well, that's our very first draft we've pulled together. We understand that it's a working document. We'll continue to refine it based on feedback. It's a lot to take in all at once because there's a lot going on. So just wanted to say that, and then we'll pull it back up again after my discussion so you can see the particular areas that are designated for urban density. They're the orange areas on the map that we're going to be talking about with this piece. So Andrew, if you can move forward to the next slide. So what we've talked to you all about over the last couple of meetings is kind of this desire we've heard from the community about housing choice that came out very early on in some of our early visioning workshops, and it's continued to be a theme that we've noticed from members of the public, that we don't see a lot of mix of housing choices. There are certainly both ends of the spectrum are represented, but some of that missing middle is kind of a planning term folks use for types of housing that are not necessarily designated as affordable by the county's definition, but they are more affordable to folks not making a ton of money. Some of your service workers would be able to afford them. And we've also heard a lot about kind of scale and form. So the community is not really interested in seeing a lot of large apartment developments. Most folks don't feel that the size and scale is appropriate for Crozet, being a small town outside of the downtown area. And so we had some questions, if you all remember, about different housing types that exist out there and what folks wanted to see in Crozet. And we've talked about this already a little bit tonight. The bungalow course was a really popular a type of housing. Accessory dwelling units received a lot of support, live work units, and then those kind of multiplexes, units that might look like a big house from the outside, but actually are broken up into a couple of different apartments within. And so looking at density and what densities would support these housing, we're finding a little bit of inconsistency, and we wanted to bring it to the group's attention. We understand that there's concern about density in Crozet from a lot of folks as well. So it's a little bit of competing goals here, and we wanted to bring it up to you all for your discussion. So Andrew, if you go to the next slide, please. So currently, this was mentioned earlier, that orange urban density category for Crozet is recommended for 6 to 12 dwelling units per acre. That's the density recommendation for Crozet. And I'll note that other areas of the county, all the other development areas of the county, this designation typically carries a range of 6 to 34 units per acre. So I wanted to bring that to the group's awareness, to your attention. A lot of what we've been trying to do across our master plan updates is bring more consistency across our land use categories. But we don't want to ignore the important context of Crozet, and there was a reason that it was 6 to 12 before. So we want to bring that to you all for your discussion. At the bottom of the slide are a couple of points about average density ranges for these types of housing that the community said they wanted to see. A lot of them would be outside of the 6 to 12 dwelling units per acre range. And the source of this is Missing Middle Housing. It's a group that has really kind of advocated and studied these types of housing across the country. So that's the source for this. So I just wanted to share that, bring it to your attention, ask kind of your thoughts on it, if you think it would be appropriate to look at changing that range broadly across Crozet, and if not broadly, are there specific areas of Crozet where you think maybe there would be support for a density higher than that 12 units per acre. And Andrea, was there one more slide there, or is the map the next slide? Yeah, so there's the map again of kind of those orange areas are the urban density residential that carry that 6 to 12 units per acre density recommendation. And then the next slide is just the question that we had posed about this. I'll restate it. Are there areas where additional density might be appropriate, especially to allow these desired housing types of the community? We won't do a poll unless you all want to. We'll just kind of open it up for discussion.
I'll jump in with a question, and that is, can we have a new neighborhood density category that is higher numbers, but only for smaller units? So as we don't get just higher numbers of the same old $400,000 condo, but higher numbers means 1,000 square foot houses and those kinds of combinations. And I don't know if that's possible, but that would be the only way I could support it.
Yes, currently our land use designations, the residential ones, recommend housing type. So if you look at neighborhood density residential, it says recommend single family housing or townhomes. You couldn't do multifamily or apartments there. So you could craft a land use category that says only these types of houses would be allowed and apartments are not allowed. That's something we could explore. We haven't done that anywhere else, but it's something that we could think about.
I think it should be mentioned that the community did have a middle housing, as you call it, development plan. Unfortunately, the PHA sold the land and we got to view, but we did have a plan for that. As far as density in that, and I guess the real question is, how close do we want to bring Crozet to half the size of the city of Charlottesville? And as I said in my response, it sort of makes the sentiment of a small town feel and sort of an oxymoron. But we're already on by the county's own numbers, anywhere from 14,000 to 17,000, and that was taken out 1,000 homes from Old Trail. And if he decides to exercise those, we'll be up to around 20,000. But I guess it just depends on how much we want to do to this community and change it. As I said in my response, when the community residents and a lot of the older residents express dismay about what's going on, it's because they have good reason to.
Joe, would you like to go?
Yeah, I think my question or comment was very similar to what Ann had, which was, what is our flexibility to try to define or to limit what this density looks like, right? Because I think, as we're all saying, there's a very much a difference between a density of 15 if that means bungalows versus the density of 15 if that means another apartment building. And as I look at it, and again, this kind of brings me back to the conversation that we had a little while ago about the Whitegate Farm property, right? I mean, I think looking at the designations here, I think for myself, when I said I think we need a little bit more density there, I'm not thinking we need a giant apartment building. I'm thinking we need something that looks more like attached. So maybe it is worth trying to craft a new category here that kind of is a little bit more than neighborhood residential. Maybe it's more like urban neighborhood, or what's the designation, right? Urban density residential, but maybe just excluding the multifamily. I mean, that seems really to me to be one of the concerns here. Can we find a category that incorporates a little bit more density, but knocks out the stuff that we don't want form-wise?
Do we have any enforcement authority, Joe?
So this would be a land use designation. You could put form recommendations in it, and then you would review future rezonings against that. There could also be a proactive step where the county wants to, kind of like you did with downtown Crozet, follow up with a proactive rezoning. It's another option, but any development in that area would be reviewed against the master plan.
Well, and I'm wondering, does this is it similar? How similar is that to the overlay? Because this kind of sounds a little bit to me like what we talked about last time with the neighborhood overlay, right? Which is you can have more density, or more density if, only under these circumstances. I mean, is there a way to broaden that out, perhaps?
Sure, that's something we could explore if the overlay could be applied to other areas.
I wanted to just add on to, I guess, two things.
We still have, I have a comment and we have 3 people's hands up, so just.
Oh, sorry.
I just briefly, I'm going to say that my answer is going to be no. I do not want to increase any upper level density in Crozet, because I also think that our number one guiding principle is preserving small town feel. So I just don't understand how a denser urban density designation is in congruence with that guiding principle. So I don't remember who was next, but Valerie and Josh, and we also got David in on the meeting now. So Valerie, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. I thought Anne's idea was a really good one to achieve the goals that it sounds like the community expressed for having more missing middle housing. And I couldn't see this. You had a screen up for a few minutes, Rachel, that I didn't get a chance to see very fast, but that showed what the typical density needs are for bungalow courts and something else. Maybe you put that back up. Yeah, there we go. I didn't understand or realize that that was typical, but if a higher density is necessary to achieve the type of missing middle housing that the community expressed support for, I like Anne's idea of just coming up with a new category. It's some different color that would establish these density ranges or some variation of them, but be very specific in saying, you know, maybe it's you only get this higher density if you use these types of, or provide these types of units, or if you're doing something typical, it's much lower. That's a way to maybe keep options open, but incentivize the types of units that the community says they want and need. I want to be sure that we're not also prohibiting any future residents of Crozet. I certainly understand about the desire to preserve the small town feel, but there is a shortage, and to the extent that that can support goals for connectivity and trails and things like that, I want to make sure we're also being welcoming to future neighbors.
Obviously, I want to be welcoming, and I also think that in actuality, we end up with acres that are buildable at the bungalow cottage court density, because you add the bonus density from the stream buffers, and then you get a dense. So anyway, I just think that we're getting into the weeds a little bit here. Josh, what's your comment?
The one thing I want to say is, you know, not to steal Doug's thunder, but we've always got to make sure that no matter how dense these go, that the resources from the county can support them, both schools, roads, and, you know, water and fire, and all the county resources need to be able to support them. I do think that since, you know, in many of the categories and many of the discussions I've been part of, you know, these bungalow courts have been a common recurring theme that, you know, we do probably need to explore some of this higher density, but always need to be clear that we have the resources to support it.
Thanks. Thanks, Josh. David, what's your comment?
I guess I'm not sure how. So if you go much above a 6 to 9 units per acre, physically and structurally, it's really going to be difficult to get anything much above that that's not in a structured building. I mean, you're just not going to be able to fit that density in, I mean, bungalows or even townhomes. I mean, the great thing, I mean, townhomes have a very small footprint. They have 2 stories, some of them have 3 stories. And that's pretty much the upper limit of the type of development, type of buildings that you can get on 6 to 9 acres. I mean, 6 to 9 units per acre. So, you know, you say 15, but then you limit the type of construction to, you know, what we would typically call a single family house, not allowing condos or structured buildings or buildings with multiple units in them. You're just never going to see it actually built. And so, you know, I think you need to, you talk about crafting these things, you need to realize the physical limitations of the properties and the buildings that you're talking about building. That's all. And I keep hearing this number, 20,000 people. I thought we already debunked 20,000 people as a top out. I thought we were looking at, even at that study, Andrew, wasn't it like 12,500 was the maximum, you know, looking at land use and what's available and all that stuff. Am I missing something there?
I don't have it pulled up right now, but I think our current, when we did the capacity analysis based on the 2010 master plan, about this time last year, based on build out as of July 1, 2019, about a 3-person per household multiplier. I think the max build out under the comp plan, master plan at that time was about 16,500. I want to say it was under 17.
But didn't y'all look at realistic, what lots were available and what you really thought was going to be built, taking into account Old Trail and everything?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 20 is not a number, right?
I think we just heard the number is around 16. So I think we can leave it at that.
No, I'm just pointing out 20 was mentioned, and that's not accurate.
I think sometimes people start talking about the ring around Crozet, and they're using our same resources. So Jenny, what's your comment?
My comment was, I guess it's been covered by other people, so I'd just like to reiterate it. I think my concern is that if you show to the community members pictures of unit types and they respond favorably to those, that's interesting and that's feedback that you're getting from the community. But just like Valerie said, when then you look at what like the cottage court density range would be, I thought that's a little higher than I would have thought too. So I feel like when you just show the community a picture and say, do you kind of feel like we need more of this? Do you like this? The whole picture isn't really there for them. Do you like this, and are you willing to have density go up to support that type of development? And so then, and we've had comments from Joe saying he would support more dense, but not if it was an apartment complex. That wouldn't be what he'd imagine on that property. And so then we're having a lot of conversation about how you say, oh, this can be this density, but it can't be these things that we don't like. It can only be these things. And then David makes a very good point that you can, essentially write something that would exclude the ability to build the types of things that you're asking for. So I would just caution everyone to be careful when we talk about density. And the theme that I think has come up in every single topic is, when we talk about this, do we have the infrastructure to support it when we're talking about increasing density, when we already have all of what's going on? We have lots of things in the pipe for coming down, and we have schools and roads and all these projects, and that's something that has been brought up in every single comment. So I think my concern is you show pictures to the community, they say that looks pretty cool, and I certainly don't want to stop these creative ways to come up with different unit types and to address the missing middle. But I do think sometimes there's a disconnect between you're showing people pictures and asking them if you like them and the reality of what allowing that to build means and how a community member might respond. And thank you.
All right, Michaela, I don't know if there's a vote or anything on this now, or.
No, we abandoned that approach. Maybe we can try again in the future, but I'll defer to Andrew here, or you, Allie, to move on.
Sure. Do we need to get to, or?
Okay. So I think if we're pretty much feeling like we're a good stopping place for this conversation, I'll just say that I think, yeah, there are a lot of competing priorities and ways of viewing this situation. We talk about density, we talk about people on the property, we talk about infrastructure, but we also are really trying to approach this from a viewpoint of what the community wants to see in those pictures and those forms. And so I think when we take a look at this, after taking your comments on mine, we'll try to think through if there are other ways we can approach this conversation and try to find ways to get the types of development we want to see in Crozet that are more in keeping with the form we've heard is really the priority for the community. But with a caveat that we also have to consider density, and at times those things are at odds when the form we like, might require a density that's above the recommendation of the master plan. So we'll keep working at this. I think there was a lot of interesting conversation about a different land use category that really prioritizes this missing middle, and we'll certainly have to do some research as staff to do the math on if this can even be built, what that means for our infrastructure and population. And I'll just, again, just remind the group that in the coming months, we're gonna have opportunities to talk more in depth about the necessary infrastructure projects we have in the community and what our options are to get these all built. We have, again, the roadways and transit connectivity workshop is open right now, and I would also encourage you all to share that out with your neighborhood groups, your friends and neighbors. I think we only have about 40 participants so far, and we know that's a major concern for a lot of folks. We need your help to help share that out. And that's, again, published on that public input hub, and I'll share that with the group afterwards. If you haven't chimed in yet, please be sure to do so, because this will be really important for us in helping to understand some of the infrastructure needs moving forward. And again, I'll just remind the group that hopefully in the next week we'll have the conservation workshop out, and we'll also probably plan to keep these topics open for as long as we need to until we can get what we feel is a better community response and better input about these issues. We know it's a difficult time of year, and we want to make sure that we're reaching the community as effectively as we can. It's a different way than what we've done before. But just want to remind the group that this is a community effort, and we need your help as our community members to help get people involved with this. I'll just make one other comment, one other note just for the CAC's awareness. We're working on scheduling a community meeting for a rezoning, which is on the north side of Route 243 National Road and the intersection with Parkview, sort of near Emerson Commons and the vet clinic right there. That'll be scheduled as kind of a special meeting for the CAC. It'll be, I believe, on the 28th or the 29th of this month. We'll follow up with you all with just information about that. If we have more than 3 members planning on attending, we'll notice that and provide an opportunity for comments as well. But that will be kind of a separate special community meeting, again, reserving this time for master plan work so we can keep this project moving forward. And with that said, we kind of skipped over the land use plan, the overall view of that, which we shared out earlier. If you have comments about that, please contact us to share your comments or questions or concern. We'll continue to work through some of the, that map did include some of the staff recommendations we discussed tonight, and we'll continue to use that map and refine and tweak those areas as we have your feedback as well. So I think that's kind of where we head next. Next month, we'll try to talk more about the conservation connectivity workshops, and in the coming months, get more into the question of implementation and how we make this master plan happen. So I think that's all I've got for tonight. If we're
why don't, since we got 8 people, why don't we go ahead and adopt the June minutes? If people had a chance to look at those, does anybody have any comments?
I'll move the question, but I have a question first.
Okay.
Where do I find this slide deck, Andrew?
I posted on the public input webpage just before the meeting. We finished it this afternoon. I will make a note to send it out to the group as well following this meeting.
Great. I have a question, and that is, when do we talk about the neighborhood center designation or village center at Clover Lawn? Is that next time?
The village center at Clover Lawn, you said?
Yes, because we've talked about it at 2 different meetings, first in January, and then it was in the draft for today. And it's certainly the meeting I was in, whenever it was, people had great concern about calling that a neighborhood center because they didn't want it to expand. And so I would agree. I think that's important, and I didn't want to have that be lost in the as we're going along. There was a discussion about village center for activities for a village or place with small scale neighborhood serving the people right there, or the neighborhood center, which is going to be more of a destination. So just want to get that back on people's radar. And the other question is about tax map 5546B, which I think is outside the growth area, out there beyond Buck Road. And so if someone can send me some more information about that, I would love to have it.
Certainly, I'll be sure to follow up on that. That was a similar property request as well. I think we did ask about that in the February workshop, I want to say, with the Central Crozet group. But I'll double check on the process with those two. I think we did ask about the Clover Lawn Center designation in January and again in February with the group, trying to narrow it between those two categories. I think we did get some direction with the Village Center was acceptable there, but we can revisit that with the group
Okay.
next month.
Because that area out there on Mid Springs Road is totally surrounded by conservation areas. So I just want to learn more about that. Thank you.
Okay.
I had a quick comment, if that's okay, Andrew or Allie. I just wanted to thank Tom Loach for sending the materials that were passed on. I hope people had a chance to read them. I think that obviously we want to be careful as a group that we don't start having an online conversation back and forth when someone writes out their thoughts and ideas, especially based on their history and involvement, in Tom's case, which is a really long time. But I guess, you know, given this new situation and everybody trying to absorb the new information and respond to it and have a chance for everyone to talk, you know, I did appreciate getting that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that because I don't think anyone, I mean, Tom mentioned it, but that he took the time to pull together some real numbers and then drafted some opinions that he has that I actually agree with most of, if not all, but based on the numbers that he has and the history that he has. And so I don't know if that's a way for us to, I don't want to start online back and forth, but if people have a really big takeaway to send to the group, as long as, I don't know what the rules are about that, but if someone else has something that they have this burning feeling about it and didn't feel like they got to express it in the meeting, is that, how would you manage that, Andrew? So it's public information, I guess. We need to make sure we're sharing that.
I think we need to avoid any sort of back and forth, you know, rapid fire deliberation about this. I'm also note that we did, in the land use law handbook has some guidance on that. Also just comment that we did ask the group to fill out, kind of do their homework ahead of time last week. We sent out advanced materials and a form on public input with some of these questions just to gather some initial feedback. And I thank you, Joe, for, I think, being the lone CAC member to respond to that. We did try to ask you all to do some homework. I think we can evaluate if that's going to be an effective thing we can do moving forward. We did try to provide a week. There's a lot of content to go through, and we're cranking this out as quickly as we can. But I certainly, I think, welcome if you all have questions or have thoughts you have articulated. I mean, it helps us keep these meetings moving along if we, you know, are able to come up with pointed discussion questions that we can understand where you all are ahead of time.
Okay.
We welcome your feedback and that kind of venue. I think just we'll provide some guidance about the land use law handbook and avoiding these email meetings. But if you have, you know, feedback you want to share with staff, we can share that with the rest of the group as well in advance of the next meeting, and that'll be totally okay.
Okay. And I mean, for me, unfortunately, I was out of town and not able to connect. And then when I was, I guess it had already closed. So I wasn't able to participate in that was sent. So hopefully my schedule will work so I can in the future. But I guess my point was just to acknowledge that Tom did spend a good amount of time collecting his thoughts together, and I think it's worth for people to read and that it can be shared with the community to avoid that issue and be transparent. But even if other members don't agree, I would thank Tom for doing that and encourage other people to read to hear that perspective.
I would just say, as a general rule, just avoid email dialogue back and forth, debating the points, reading them and accepting them and sharing points.
Right. This wasn't a back and forth. It was just a letter of, here's my opinion.
I saw it and read it. Yeah, I think it's very good. That's helpful information for us.
I just wanted to acknowledge it and thank him for taking the time to get that together. But I do understand it's slippery slope with the back and forth type of thing. We absolutely don't want to do that. So,
well, how about if we just establish that if people have things to share, they could send it to Andrew and he can forward it out to the whole group, and nobody uses reply all for anything. And then you're sure to be safe.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine. There was absolutely no no problem. So I don't think we need to rehash FOIA rules right now. I just, that's what happened. Tom sent it to me and I forwarded it to the group. It could be Andrew instead of me, but it's all legit. And I think
Yeah. I couldn't open them, but I will keep working on that. Thank you.
I'll just comment again that Michaela shared the public input link in the chat. It was never closed. It's still open. If you have comments or questions about the content we discussed tonight, if you do them in there, we avoid the FOIA issue and it's all out there.
Yeah, I think, yeah, if Tom could have shared his on the public input, that would have also been good, or, you know, in addition to emailing it. And I also think we should keep trying with the homework, and maybe people just need to adjust to doing that, just because we are in this important master plan revision, and we are asking the committee members to do a little extra and, you know, show up for these. So I think we have a lot of people absent, and it's because of July, but hopefully next time in August, people can both appear at the meeting and do the reading. I don't really think a week is too little time, because, you know, if you happen to be on vacation that week, then that's not enough time. But otherwise, I think it kind of gets buried. So I mean, we could maybe shoot for like 10 to 14 days notice for these homework assignments, but I think we should keep trying to do them, just because, yeah, we have a lot of material to go through, and the Zoom meetings can't be as long as in-person meetings. That being said, I think we should try to wrap up.
I'll just quickly respond to a question that came through the chat. We're going to keep the public input meeting questions for this meeting open indefinitely. There's no cutoff there, so we'll continue to monitor. I expect that as we move to the next meeting, we probably won't get a whole lot of new responses on it, but we'll monitor that for new responses.
So don't we still need to make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting, which I think I'm making now?
Great. Does someone want to second that?
Second.
So I think, Andrew, you just unmute us all and we can voice vote.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. That covers that.
All right, thanks, Joe, for being secretary this year. And is that it? I can read the closing statement, Andrew. All right, the next meeting of the CCAC is scheduled now for Wednesday, August 12th, 7 p.m. Same format. Opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting will be posted at a later date in accordance with Emergency Ordinance number 20-A6 and open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And that's it. Thanks for coming, you guys, and thanks citizen attendees also.
Thank you, everybody. Stay cool and safe.
Thank you.
See you next time.